Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Women on Top series. So, a lot of you messaged me after I announced it, asking why I was doing this after already having my own podcast. This round is on me. So, why the need for Women on Top series on LinkedIn? Firstly, I have to admit that over the years, I have been really lucky to meet some incredible women and get to know about the work they do. And some of it is so unique and completely out of the box. They have really inspiring stories, and I believe the best way to inspire and make an impact is to share their stories, with the wider community. So that's how I decided to start Women on Top. And for my first episode, I am super excited to introduce a dear friend and a super achiever, Suchita Salwan. Suchita graduated with a degree in economics. She worked with Wizcraft on the Commonwealth Games and then went on to work with the BBC as a digital and brand marketer for BBC Entertainment India and launched finally LBB, which is a marketplace to discover and shop from India's unique and emerging brands with a mission to humanize commerce. So we're going to be talking a lot more about this today, but LBB actually connects 22 million users with 60,000 brands and businesses. Wow. Enabling them to get discovered and to retail their products to customers across India. Suchita has been on Forbes India and Forbes Asia 30 under 30 lists, Forbes W Power list, Fortune India 40 under 40, and the list goes on. And she's also been a speaker at Harvard University's India Conference, among other accolades. Suchita, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here on the inaugural session.
Thanks for having me, man. Great to be here.
So, Suchita, what made you take the plunge into entrepreneurship?
I don't know. I think it was just like a series of I wouldn't say reckless, but I think a lot of the approach back then was, what could possibly go wrong, right? And if this doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. I'll find another job and I'll, bounce back into the corporate world. But I think really where it came from was, a little bit of recklessness. I think jokes aside, I've always generally been very enthu about working, right? I absolutely love learning. And I think for me, LBB actually started as a Tumblr blog, and then we sort of graduated to a website, and it was a bit of a side hustle while I was still at the BBC, and I was just learning so much about everything from how small to mid-sized businesses operate in our country, P&L management, finances, hiring, and I think it was more that quest and that curiosity to just learn more, which made me want to take the plunge, so to speak. But a mix of just being very interested in being interesting and being a little reckless in my early 20s. That's what made me start up.
It's really interesting. You mentioned that you actually started dabbling in it while you still had your job. And is that something that you would recommend, that, if someone is thinking about possibly starting their own business, that, don't quit working and like completely plunge into it, without maybe testing the grounds before you do take that plunge?
I think, it's a bunch of different things. And obviously, I think, it totally depends on people's circumstances, right? I'm not from IIT. I'm not from IIM. I'm not a dude. So that basically limits my, ability to do a lot of things, whether it's, coding, raising money, or making pitch decks. At least it did back in the day. So I think a part of it is circumstantial. You need to, have enough self-awareness about what are my circumstances, what am I good at, what am I really not good at. And also, I think building a business, and I remember getting this advice earlier on, where someone had mentioned that you need to commit the next decade of your life to this. And I think for you to want to commit a decade of your life to anything, you need to genuinely care enough about what you're building. I'm not even saying be passionate, right? But you need to care. You need to care either about the customer that you're going after or the merchant that you're catering to. So I think for me, it was more of, I wasn't fully convinced if this warranted a startup, and if this really warranted the next decade of my life. It took me about 2 years to build that conviction before I decided to quit my job, or frankly, even before we raised our first round of investment. And I think those were the two sort of, when I felt that, hey, this could be a large opportunity, and this could be a great opportunity not only for my customers and merchants, but even for me. And I think the second thing was, you see early indications of like product market fit, right? You see early indications of customers really liking what you're doing, merchants seeing some amount of results. And I obviously speak in the dichotomy of customers and merchants because we're a marketplace.
Right.
But I think it's those two triggers that really, convince me to say, hey, you know what, let me make these circumstances work for me and give it a shot.
And at what point then did you start building a team? I mean, and how did you go about that? Did you sort of, where did you start hiring first? For what position? And, what did you feel you needed the most support in to get going?
So, obviously we've gone through our own sort of like journeys. So, we started out as a content community only platform, realized that there are multiple unique ways to actually mobilize your content and community to create value. So the way we've hired and, who we've hired has actually changed considerably, with even the way in which our business model has morphed. So, what we did on day one, when, we had no capital in the bank was, I just needed content writers, right? So the first couple of hiring that we did was just literally finding great content writers, and people who generally were curious, right? They had a pulse of what customers were interested in. They had a pulse of what was going on more locally speaking. So on day one, most of our hires were content writers. We of course were a bootstrap business, so we really weren't recruiting from the world's best universities or any of that. Not that I think that that's what's needed for content as a space, but that's how we initially started hiring. Obviously, as we built more complexity into the business, our second phase of hiring became more technology and product. So for me, it was important to to bring in a co-founder who had complementary skills to me, given that my background is more in operations and brand. And in more recent years, our focus has become more so on hiring in commerce. But I think for entrepreneurs who are listening, there's a lot of advice that's given on the internet around, only hire the best. But I think people who write these articles don't realize that startups don't always have the budgets to hire the best. And what the best is keeps changing as you also evolve as a company and as a founder. But for us, yeah, day one was content writers, added technology and product, and then of course more recently we've doubled down on the way we monetize our content and community.
And you sort of mentioned about your strength being in the marketing and operations part of it. So tell me a little bit more about that. Like how, and you also talked about earlier the because it was content driven and the different ways that you could kind of widen the audience for that content. So how did you go about that? Tell us a little bit about the marketing and media mix at play for LBB, like through its journey.
So, actually for us, when we started LBB, platforms like Facebook were, just at their getting closer to their peak.
Right.
And Instagram was this like fledgling platform. I remember, I think we were one of the first few handles that, from a business perspective, that actually went up on Instagram and really started, playing around with pieces of the IG, Facebook sort of family. I think when we started out, we honestly, we grew a lot on the back of that initial wave that customers saw when it came to Facebook. And I remember we went from like 0 to 500,000 followers in like record time, right? Because we were just riding that wave of Facebook itself growing considerably. I think we invested in Instagram at the right time. So Instagram for us, also came at a time when that also was a new and upcoming platform. So we were able to again go from 0 to 500,000 followers fairly quickly on these two platforms. I think the thing that I've learned from a marketing perspective is you have to make your business channel proof. Because otherwise you're at the mercy of these businesses, right? I remember when Facebook really started tinkering around with its algorithms and sorry, but like screwed over a lot of publishers while making that tinkering happen. Even we saw that dip, right, where suddenly your engagement rates fall and one of your large sources of traffic sort of goes for a toss because people have decided to switch their algorithms around. So I think what we started investing in, closer to 2018, was just diversifying our media mix and our channel mix. So for instance, today SEO is a large driver of traffic for us, right? And SEO is just one of those like painfully long things that you need to invest in, but you do see, that return on investment coming back to you at a certain clip. There obviously was social media, but I think the good thing that worked for us with respect to our investment in social media was we saw this fairly good surge in branded traffic. So even today, there's a significant percentage of the search traffic that we get that's branded LBB. So people will look for jute home decor LBB, and then they'll come to a particular page, and then they'll sort of go about their customer journey. I think the other channel that became critical for us was our app. Because I believe that if you genuinely want to grow as a business, you need to own your audience, right? So for example, for you it may be your like WhatsApp database or your emailer database, but for us a lot of the way we own the traffic is by really investing in our app, because that's where we see the best sort of return on a customer acquired. So I think the one big learning for me has been always keep your channels diverse. Be focused about okay, what are the channels that can actually drive long term ROI for me, because every channel has a different ROI associated with it, and also channels keep changing their own requirements, etc. But I think it's imperative to make sure that a considerable part of your traffic, footfall, whatever is coming from your own channels, which in our case, of course, are our website and our app.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we're sort of going through as well, in the F&B industry, where we don't want to be dependent on aggregators, right? Where then they control the customer base, and you're just a service provider, F&B provider. And so I completely agree with you on that. So, you now, you're a hardcore sort of e-commerce business, move from, content where you started out to now e-commerce. Tell me some of the challenges that you faced, what worked and what didn't, like what were some of the pitfalls that you kind of, the roadblocks that you hit to get to where you are today?
I think for us, the transition from content community to commerce was honestly pretty seamless for multiple different reasons. One is, we realize that content actually needs to be everywhere, right? So when people talk about content marketing, people come up with all kinds of abstractions, right? Like content marketing is equal to writing blogs and then backlinking to get SEO traffic, or content marketing is having a YouTube channel. But I think our lens has always been that, content is everywhere. It's on your product display pages. It's how you post on LinkedIn. It's how you send out your newsletters. It's how you send out your WhatsApp SMSs that your customers may be getting. And I think for us, our investments in our first couple of years of content and community, the big moat that they created for us was they helped us make LBB an ecosystem play instead of being only a destination where customers come to shop.
Right.
In fact, that's a lot the narrative that we stand against, right? Because we believe that if you actually want to make a customer buy an emerging brand or business, or a brand or business that they may not have heard of before, you need to build trust with the customer over a period of time. And honestly, the only way to build trust is if you're giving them reasons to come to you, when you're not only selling them shit, right? And I think that content and community piece really helped us sort of hedge our bets against just becoming yet another e-com player, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Or becoming yet another aggregator of merchants or brands. I think the second big win that our content and community piece did for us was, so today 90% of the merchants who are onboarded on LBB, which is either like our advertisers, our a lead generating businesses, or brands that directly sell on LBB, 90% of them are actually inbound. So I think a lot of what we were able to establish through our content and community piece is that if you stand for something in the mind of a customer, the customer will actually start coming to you for that thing. And I think because for such a long time we were a destination for you to discover the undiscovered, right, or for you to discover hidden gems. Now any brand that thinks that they are a hidden gem, or that they're doing something really different and really unique, the first destination that immediately comes to their mind is, hey, let me go to LBB.
Yeah.
And I think the way that this plays out in the long run is it actually helps you really control your costs, because if you look at a lot of these large platforms, big cost centers for them is either customer acquisition cost, right, or it becomes merchant acquisition cost. I'm not saying for us the cost is zero, but it's a very, very competitive. It will be 10 to 20% the cost of a lot of these other larger platforms, because we invested in this content and community piece. So I think for us, we didn't really look at it as a transition. That said, obviously there was this whole organizational KRA KPI alignment. We obviously had to almost I won't say divide, but basically create these two sections within our organization. One is very left brain, and the other is very right brain. So there's one which is on the demand side, that's very creative, customer oriented, and then there's this other part of our organization that's on the merchant side, which is very operational. But I think you live and you learn, right? We've obviously fumbled a lot around along the way. So apologies to any of our customers who didn't have anything less than a stellar customer experience. But I think the great thing about our business is, both me and my co-founder Dhruv, we ourselves are very proactive about just hearing straight from our merchants and our customers. And I think, as a founder, the least that you can do is just not forget who your actual, customers are. And those are people who are, either coming to your platform, or merchants who are trusting your platform with driving, revenue for them. And I think that helped us sort of, buffer the journey in between going from a content community to also adding commerce as a mix.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the pandemic and how that's impacted your business, because it really feels like the world has grown digitally at an accelerated pace in the last 18 months. I know our business has, and what were some of the trends that you saw, and I mean, are you how can you sort of leverage on this based on what you've seen?
So I think, I mean, there's no doubt that the pandemic was horrendous for India's small to mid-sized businesses, right? I mean, imagine losing cash flows for 6 months in one shot, having your supply chain disrupted because of the, multiple sort of lockdowns. And I think, specifically with the second wave, what we saw was a lot of our merchants themselves were affected, right? Either they were affected or their families were affected. Long story short, I think no one can take away the absolute disruption that happened because of lockdown one, and obviously second, the pandemic. I think the interesting things, and the more glass is half full way to sort of look at it, is I think it's really reminded brands that they need to have multiple channels of customer acquisition. You and I were talking about this right before we went live, where everyone has realized that I cannot only count on my offline store, and frankly, why should I, right? In fact, not only can I not count only on my offline store, I also can't only count on Zomato, Swiggy, Amazon, Flipkart. I need to have more sources of revenue, so that there is parts of my revenue that are highly defensible, right? So what we saw a lot of the smarter brands do is, they either activated B2B sales, for instance. So a lot of brands really started looking at more enterprise sales in order to drive some amount of revenue for them. There were others who said, what, I'm sick of only running my store. I need to start selling wherever my customers are. And in fact, we saw this massive surge. In fact, to date, on a week on week level, we see a 10% growth in terms of number of inbound merchants who are coming to us, because everyone's realized that I need to figure out how I'm not even saying sell online, but how I build my brand online, right? The same merchant who's just like, how do I don't really care about photography. Let me just put some, boring model against white background photos, on my Instagram. They themselves have realized that their Instagram followers are not going to grow if they've got, very personality-less photos, sort of going up. So I think suddenly these merchants become very conscious, where they've realized the importance of investing in brand. They've realized actually how small a fish in the giant ocean that they are. And if they want to, eat more of the consumption pie, they need to start looking at themselves in the mirror and really asking, important questions, which is, what is my positioning? Why do I exist? How am I acquiring customers? and also how am I retaining these customers that I'm acquiring. So I think net, there's generally been this surge of self-awareness,
Yeah.
which has either led to people meditating a lot, or it's led to people really thinking through how they think of where they exist, what they do, and why they do what they do.
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely agree with you. And we went through something similar with, we were always like, oh, we're an offline, we're in the offline space. So, we're restricted to the people around us. We don't need to invest in paid marketing. This is not like people who like our food will come. And we really had that whole approach to it. And then, of course, like you said, we had to really venture into the delivery space, which we always kind of said was hey, that's not the cool thing to do. And, but you had to kind of pivot and be, flexible. I think that was really and, as people have been saying, being nimble. But we also in January realized that, no, digital is where you're now located, right? You're in the digital world and you're not just on the high street. And so you do have to invest. You have to change your whole approach to how you, go to market now. And that was like a big learning for me as well, over this the course of this last year. Tell me, what is the easiest way for people to connect with you and explore collaborations or contributions to LBB?
I think more than happy to get connected on LinkedIn, but please don't send me a request saying, "Hey, your profile looks interesting," because I will ignore and not accept. Yeah, or
What
get in
is
touch.
what should they be sending you, and what's the best way to kind of
I think
create
just give me
connection?
context, because I think that helps tremendously, right? So if you give me context saying, hey, I'm looking for feedback, or hey, I'd love to sell on LBB, or hey, I'd love to become an LBB insider. I think the more context you give, the better it is. But yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram. I am wherever our customer is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Suchita, what's been your experience? Of course, you would only know working as a woman what it's like being a woman, but what's your experience and what's your sort of advice to women entrepreneurs?
I have like a love-hate relationship with this whole like construct of like female entrepreneur. I get why, it's important to sort of create a community around women entrepreneurs, because, there's such few of us. And I think second, the challenges that we guys face are more or less similar. I think, the one thing that I've learned is don't sweat the small stuff, right? There are a lot of people who will be like rude, who will say like passive, sexist stuff. There's all kinds of like rubbish that will happen, right? But I think the difference in between like a winner and a loser is a winner always picks what battles they want to fight, right? So I think the one thing that I'll say is, generally as humans and as, working professionals or as entrepreneurs, you've got enough to deal with in a day, in a week, in a month. Don't sweat the small stuff. Someone else's prejudice isn't your problem. And I think, just really, really stay focused on what it is that you want to do and what it is that you want to build. And I think the second thing that has honestly really helped me a lot is I used to have a bit of a chip on my shoulder. Maybe it was because I was this, I'm assuming, I'm hoping everyone in their early 20s is a little, like, oh, I know this, and like I can rock and roll with this. But I think when realities of running a business start hitting you, you kind of realize how much of business building really comes through working with the right people, right? And I think I've been extremely, extremely, extremely lucky. Sometimes I joke with my colleagues saying I don't know why this person wants to help me, but I'm so glad they do. But I think really, really. Invest in creating some sort of like a sounding board around you, and really invest in creating relationships with people who will ask you the tough questions, because I think for me that's been monumental, right? And the people who ask you these tough questions could be from your industry, from another industry. They could be people you really admire. They could be people who you haven't really heard of, but you know that they've built something really meaningful. But really solicit, ask for help. And I think if you ask for help, you'll be surprised at the number of people who will, especially if you really care about what you're building, you'll be surprised at the number of people and the type of people who will, who will be there just a call away to help you think things through.
Yeah, I absolutely second that. And listen, this has been really enlightening, and I hope it's been helpful to everyone listening. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, and of course, like, all the very best to LBB, and the many years ahead of this exciting journey you're on.
Thanks so much, man, Gauri. Thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you.